and you're not going to really know when it's going to come, and it will happen. It'll just come out of nowhere. It's just one of those things where that if you're someone who's really not great at being able to handle that heavy variance of getting from one end of the spectrum to the other of just these emotional pulls, that's the thing you really gotta brace yourself for. Because I'm a big believer in this, like great startups, or I think the key to building a startup to get I think if you have any sort of exit or any sort of outcome, like that's a huge win in a world where there's like a 90% plus failure rate. The key, I think, to that or whatever is finding a way to hang on. And that's really like what it is.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Julian D'Angelo on the program. He is the founder for Talin, a Team Ignite portfolio company. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. Good to get to chat a little more today.
So, would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background before I got into recruiter tech and building technology for the staffing and recruiting space is actually completely different industry. I was as a growth marketer, early stage venture backed B2B SaaS, and did that for almost a decade. Pre-seed to seed was sort of my sweet spot, helping those companies get from anywhere from zero to very little revenue to their first $1 million in ARR. That was the niche I had kind of carved out for myself.
As a consultant, like a growth consultant, kind of parachuting into these early stage companies and helping them.
Yeah, so I was internal first. I was head of growth at a company called Ross Intelligence, which was building some. This is before, way before sort of ChatGPT was a household name, 2018, and I was in house there, and after leaving Ross, ended up doing fractional work for a few different companies at the same time.
It's not Ross, the clothing company, the discount clothing company? Or?
No, definitely not. Ross. Interesting story there, by the way. That's maybe we could dive into that later, but Ross is in the middle of a lawsuit with Thomson Reuters, the billion-dollar media conglomerate there. But after that all kind of came to be, was kind of fractional, a few different early stage startups there, and they pulled me in like very organically to help with hiring. They said, hey, we need help kind of building out these early core growth functions. And then I just spun out into a recruiting firm. We just started making placements on contingency for early stage startups. And then that's where I got to know the industry, and light bulb went off for Talin. Just got obsessed with the problem, couldn't stop thinking about just how essentially manual and tedious, the workflows were, the fragmented tool sets, the bad, unclean data, etc. Just all of this stuff that you needed to, essentially acquire clients and, acquire talent sort of as an agency. And so we decided to build a platform to take care of essentially all of those pieces in one place for them.
I love this. So it's a verticalized MarTech for recruiting. And I love this story because I too came from MarTech, built ran demand gen for a few startups, and then realized that I had to change the product if I was going to actually change revenue. And but I love this story because it's like you got this really deep exposure to growth marketing, and then you get this adjacent industry exposure of like all these world-class MarTech tools that I'm used to are just not available over here in this domain. And you're like,
exactly.
Well, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy that I have to hack stuff together with 10, 15-year-old technology to get it to work, comparatively to like using like world-class platforms over on the MarTech space.
Exactly. And that was kind of the first of, since then, it's almost like, a series of light bulbs go off that change your thesis. And I think it like a lot of ways deepen your thesis. It becomes, there becomes a bunch of different layers to, the problem as you get really, really close to it. But that was the first one. That was like out of the gate where I said, my God, like it was so bad. It was shocking to a point where you're used to those, like you said, these like world-class. I was used to, integrating HubSpot with, my Apollo account, and then a data validation tool with lead scoring, you know what I mean? In a multi-channel, see, like all of that stuff.
Weighted pipelines and all kinds of automation workflows. If this, then that kind of branching conversation trees and even AI, right? Even just auto-generate sales copy and outbound just doesn't exist. I know LinkedIn's trying, and one of our partners ran the talent solution marketing team, so we're pretty familiar with the space and what they're trying to do. But maybe you could talk about the inception, like forming the team and working on it in the evenings and weekends. Like kind of for the founders out there that are noodling on an idea, how did you get started and what steps did you take, and kind of at what point did it become really real?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a point where I essentially had the idea, started to see a lot of evidence of kind of some problem validation, and then sort of said, okay, my next step is to feel really confident about the problem and validate it to, another degree. So I was still consulting for a few different companies, still had my day job, was still, paying the bills, doing my normal thing. And then essentially just started slowly on the side. I just started by interviewing recruiting firms, just very open-ended to see what I could learn. I did about 25 of those. And then
essentially like the 4 Steps to Epiphany or the Startup Owner's Manual or reading any of those kind of books?
I honestly, I wish I don't know if I wish, but I probably should have applied more of a framework to it. All I knew is that I didn't want to be too leading in those interviews to avoid just creating sort of bias. And I just wanted to make it, I made a lot of it really open-ended. And then what I did was I used like Autopilot or, one of those to compile all the transcripts, and then just ran sort of analysis on the raw transcripts to look for patterns and sort of things like that. So
I record all my, in addition to these podcasts, I record all my founder meetings as well. When you looks like you were pitching me. And so hopefully I'll have this rich data set, and I have, I don't know, thousands of hours now of data that potentially I can use to backtest in the future some predictive AI.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you can imagine, hey, look at all our portfolio companies that panned out. What were the common themes or parallels?
Yeah, go find stuff in those recordings.
Yeah.
And what they wrote, what was in their deck. So I have this rich Team Ignite data set now that I've been growing now for years.
Oh yeah, and I think that's where I think that's where venture as a whole eventually will probably go, at least in part. I actually heard of I don't remember their name, but I heard of a VC firm that has like a proprietary personality test for founders.
Oh, they're all over the place. We had Fred Campbell from Track on the podcast recently, just a few episodes ago, and they've been using proprietary models to make decisions very quickly at a high scale. And I think it'll be AI enabled in the future, just like startups are, right? Like we're running into founders that have, $1 million of revenue and no employees, right? Some AI and some contractors and just cranking it out and staying lean. And I think the future of startups and venture both is just a higher leverage. And I wonder, will I ever even need to hire anybody for my venture firm? Or do I just kind of keep scaling it with AI? I'm starting to wire AI into my Airtable and, stuff like that. And maybe eventually it's just all AI assisted. It's like, oh, I've looked at all the deal flow from yesterday. Here's all 30 deals. I ran it against your framework. It's just like an assistant would, just like an associate.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think it's the scary part is trying to figure out, are we going to have, there's two versions of it, right? Are we going to have the same number of employees? We're just going to be 10 times as productive and grow 10 times faster with the same, or are we going to get the same work done with a 10th of the employees?
Probably a little bit of both would be my prediction. Yeah. So the supply of software has not met the demand of software would be my thesis. And so I think you're going to see a longer tail of software, smaller and smaller little micro outcomes. All these like little 5 million, 3 million pre-seed that turn into $50 million companies. I think there's going to be a lot more of those, these 10 and 20x outcomes at a higher rate than there has ever been, because you don't have to have this crazy aggregation of talent and to the top. That's what software really did, is it just basically leveraged the really, really already successful people to do more. But I think AI now is going to make it so anybody with an idea can have a world-class team of people to help them bring that idea to life. And I think it creates this long tail that fills every little niche in our economy, right? I need software that, is predictive underwater basket weaving technology. Like we will invent when the cost of the inputs go to zero, the quantity demanded asymptotes to infinity, right? Just economically. So that's my prediction. I don't know how it all works out, but
yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think it comes down to the individual founders too. I think among founders is going that way as well. I think we're more on, hey, look at that founder had a, $1 billion exit, but they owned 2% of the company. I mean, that's still great, but it's
still only $20 million, right? Out of $1 billion company.
Out of $1 billion company, they're like, it took them a decade to do it. Where it's like, if I just raise one round
a year,
exactly. If I raise one round, and I take the $5 million cap, get it to 50, I give away 15% in a pre-seed, you know what I mean? And I think there's more founders that are kind of thinking of that as like a viable option. At the end of the day, you're thinking about hopefully, like, number one, like the well-being of your company, and after the well-being of your company, it's fund investors, right? Kind of so it's culturally. It's
I love this. What you're saying here. I had a founder friend of mine. He was my former boss, actually, at a unicorn we worked at together. And we just caught up. And he bootstrapped his startup and never took outside funding. And he goes, you know what? If I would have at least taken 1 or 2 rounds, instead of having 100% of this like small little company that I think they got up to $3 million in revenue or something. So maybe that's worth 5 to 10x forward revenue. I could have had, 80% or 60% of something much bigger. And so I think it is this, like what you're saying is like, it's a dance between growth and capturing the huge market, and raising the $5 or $10 million Series A or B kind of rounds to kind of go after it, versus, like, nope, slow and steady. Let's run this thing at break even and kind of just reinvest everything, try to keep as much equity as possible, grow as fast as possible. But I think what's happening, the other factor, this orthogonal thing that's happening, is AI is enabling you to do that at a better clip than ever, right? And raise less money. And this big part of our thesis is that there'll be more startups than ever created in the next 10 years that have fewer and fewer capital needs than ever in history. And so it bodes well for really early stage firms like us that do a high volume of small checks, because we can get into all these like little like 5 million cap rounds. And maybe they don't even raise another round, or maybe they raise like an A, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost like the market right now is already kind of forcing that a little bit, because the $2 million pre-seed is like, see you later, unless you are deep tech or you're like you're an industry that actually is that capital intensive. Those are the requirements. If you're a B2B SaaS, you know what I mean, AI enabled or not, you say like, hey, I want to raise $2 million as a pre-seed, pre-revenue. It's like, get out of here. You know what I mean? That's just not, that's not happening. 500K, like that's 600K. That's the round
500K
you're raising.
5 is the magic number for pre-seed, I think. Sometimes you go 750 on 7 or something like that. Usually 10 to 15% dilution. And you just hit the milestones. You burn capital, get it growing, and then you reassess. Like, hey, did we hit our milestones? Are we growing fast enough? Do we actually need to raise? Or are there additional AI widgets that we can wire into our operations, marketing, sales, customer engineering, QA? And we have portfolio companies in all of these spaces, so we know it's possible, right? To just kind of wire in all this AI everywhere. But
Now, do you think, because obviously, you think about venture math, right? Power law and stuff like that, right? The 100x is really what VCs are typically like looking for. If what we're saying comes to pass in one way or another, do you think it maybe changes the equation of like venture math in the future?
I think it might. I think what might happen, time will tell, but my prediction is a fattening of the long tail. And there's still this huge slope up and to the left of the power law, right? Or up and to the right, depending on your horizontal orientation. But there's still a power law. But I think instead of just fewer and fewer bigger successes, there's a more moderate amount of medium successes, is how I would describe it. So a fattening of the tail. And so, like, as a VC, am I happier if I go make 100 investments in my fund? Am I happier if I have one that goes 1,000x and everything goes to 0? So I have a 10x fund. Or am I happier if I have all 100 go to 10x? I should be indifferent. It's basically the same, just mathematically. I think I should be happier that I consistently picked good companies that I invested at a 5 cap, they exited at a 50. Versus I picked one, got lucky. Wow, good job, Brian. You got lucky once. I think... my LPs, I don't know how they would feel, but I feel like I would be happier as an investor to have most of my startups have moderate success than just have one that has an enormous, crazy Uber level success. Now, I think statistically, probably I'll hit a couple of those in my career, hopefully. And I'll have my Uber, Jason Calacanis' Uber that I can talk about forever, you know? And I'll be on a podcast 1954. Be like,
Yep.
yeah, I invested in Uber, you know? I love you, Jason, by the way. You're the reason I'm sitting here doing this stuff.
I love that. I do love that podcast. I listen to it every Friday. So.
Well, let's talk. I could talk about AI stuff for hours, but tell us more about your company.
Yeah, it's an interesting play. Is what we are like. If I had to like characterize us, and it's kind of a this could be considered a bit of a sellout, but just saying, hey, we're X, we're Uber for X or whatever. The two companies I kind of look at that what we're trying to really be for staffing and recruiting agencies is one is Clay.com, if you're familiar with them. For those of you that don't know what Clay is,
tell us.
Brilliant startup. I'm a power user on Clay myself. Is essentially gives you the ability to amalgamate all of your data sources for your outbound motions and then personalize your outbound using AI at scale. So being able to send 500 emails with personalization that isn't just very, very shallow level personalization, right? I could essentially
we went to the same school.
Exactly. That, which is like, I call it BS personalization, shallow. It doesn't actually move the needle when you're looking at the metrics you care about, response rate, positive reply rate, stuff like that. We're doing a lot of them. It's so Clay's very complicated to use. You essentially need to be a growth marketer or an ops consultant or a marketing agency. That's who their ICP is. That's who they sell into. Even like sales teams
power users. Yeah.
Exactly.
People that really know what they're doing. Yeah.
Which is still a massive market, especially like now. I mean, marketing agencies alone, like that's you could be a unicorn off just all the agencies, in the world. You give it to a salesperson or you give it to, especially if you give it to a recruiter, that's going to be really difficult to get that working out of the box without a huge level of expertise. So a number of those functions, so amalgamating all the data sources, that's something that we do. On Clay, you configure it yourself. On Talin, it's taken care of for you. So our front end UX is like, you just know that you're going to get,
right.
You need someone.
Which is the beauty of verticalized SaaS, right? Is
exactly.
Along comes Clay.com or HubSpot, and they can kind of do a little bit of everything for everyone, but not really great for anyone. They have plays and they have modules and pricing, and they try to package it and take it to market for verticals, but they never really do an excellent job. And then along comes Talin or some other verticalized SaaS. It's like, hey, we're going to nail this for this one vertical. And turns out that's a huge market worldwide. That's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's kind of the playbook, right?
Exactly. And you essentially, you have a much aligned like universe of the possibilities around workflows. Like there's maybe 5 or 6 workflows when it comes to, outbound for recruiting agencies and how they do that. Right. So because you can be very prescriptive with your UX and your UI. And that's the power of being niche and verticalized, when it comes to SaaS. And then the second piece of what we are like also kind of trying to do is, and you actually mentioned them, is sort of being, and this is really more the long-term play, is really becoming more of a, a HubSpot for these agencies, because again, they have a lot of software needs, and they have a really fragmented toolkit and sort of tech stack. They got to use a bunch of different tools there, and many of those tools are not designed for staffing and recruiting agencies. They're
shoehorning kind of haphazardly, trying to like reverse engineer this thing that was meant for like content, small business marketing into this other workflow.
Yeah, it's like this market is like a cherry on top for many other pointed solutions, but it's a $700 billion a year market. And so that just didn't make sense to us as to why there wasn't more companies designing, specifically, sort of for them. And then obviously the core, I keep talking about outbound, just to clarify for everyone, like outbound is the core of what we do, because we want to power how recruiting agencies acquire talent and how they acquire customers through outbound, right? They use multi-channel.
I mean, recruiters in a lot of way they're brokers, right? Brokers of people. On one side, you're trying to get listings, right? You're trying to get these like, almost like a real estate broker. You're trying to get these like, I'm trying to list this person that's available, and I'm trying to list this job that's available. And so I'm trying to meet the two sides of the demand.
Exactly. And I really view like outbound in general as a form of display marketing. When you're doing it at scale, I'm putting together a well-defined list. I'm messaging this list en masse in some way, I personally don't consider it spam, as long as the relevancy, to me, like the degree of relevancy determines if something is spam. Something spam when it's like my relevancy is like quite low for part of this list, but because I'm not doing the segmentation work.
It's like completely out of left field. There's nothing about this email or LinkedIn outreach that speaks to me. There's no connection here. It's just like some random smattering of like, hey, I noticed like at Team Ignite, you guys hire a lot. And I'm like, no, I have no employees. Like, what are you talking? I have no job listings. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
I get called inbound where it's like, hey, you probably have a lot of portfolio companies that are struggling with this. You know, we offer that. And I'm like, okay, a little better. And then the best ones are like, hey, I saw we have some mutual connections, A, B, and C. By the way, we went to this school together, and I think you'd be a great, fit for this product or this job or whatever. It's like a very thoughtful, like somebody either used really advanced AI or spent minutes trying to customize this message.
Bingo. And that's exactly it. It takes either, probably a solid 5 to 10 minutes of research, another 5 minutes to craft that email. That's if you're very good, right? That's if you are, almost an expert at doing that. It'll take you that long. Or you are using, really fine-tuned AI to sort of make that happen. And that message, that fits the bucket of hundreds of people, not thousands. I think if you're sending out campaign to 4,000 people, it means the relevancy probably isn't there for everybody, right?
Yeah.
200, 300, if you can just build a bucket of them that all share the same 4, 5, 6 elements of a commonality, I can build a highly relevant message that's going to get me an 8%, a 12% reply rate. 50, 60% of them are positive replies, right? You say that to any sales team, and that's 4 or 5x, what most kind of traditional SDR sales teams are doing on their email campaigns, and certainly what recruiters are kind of doing on their own outbound campaigns.
Yeah, so let's dig into that for a sec. So the 4 or 5x, is that part of the pitch when you guys are talking to recruiters? Is like, hey, you're having a certain amount of like this metric, and we can make it this other, we can grow that 4 or 5x.
Yeah, so it's interesting with recruiters. We've obviously tested, a fair bit of how we sort of position our tool and the value that we bring, and we've tried like the sort of efficacy angle, saying, hey, we increase your response rate to XYZ. A lot of them end up either not fully believing it, or just by virtue of sort of their own education, their own experiences, their own bias, it's not what gets them super excited, even though, you think it probably should, but just, hey, it's virtue of sort of the industry itself. What gets them really excited and how we position our tool, and this is true, and this is a big lens of how we look at everything, is we say, hey, the average Talin customer saves 6 hours per week on manual and tedious tasks of every single individual employee in your agency. And then say, hey, let's extrapolate that out. You've got 8 recruiters on your team. Okay, great. What does that look like on an annual basis? Okay, cool. It's about 600 hours a year.
Yeah, it's like a full-time equivalent person that you gain by using Talin. And guess what? We're getting a fraction of that cost.
and in this industry, a lot of them operate on contingency, right? And so you can actually equate a dollar figure to hours a lot of the time. Hey, how many hours of labor does it take you to fill in, to fill a role? And what's that value? Hey, yeah, we charge about $30K every time we do a perm role. Or if they're doing temp, they say, hey, yeah, we make, average temp placement will bring in about $12K a year on the spread that we make on that temporary worker or whatnot. So I can say, hey, 600 hours a year, what's that worth? Us about $700K to us.
Wow.
Okay, great. And then it becomes
that's the beauty of vertical SaaS. It's like, exactly what the use case is. You know exactly how you deliver value. And now you can say, hey, I'm going to, given your size of company, how many seats you have, you're going to deliver this much value. And let's give it a 90-day pilot and see how it goes.
Yeah. You got it. And then you got to deliver,
and then you got to deliver. Yeah.
And then you got to deliver. Yeah. But
what are some of those other gaps that you guys have identified that, the kind of HubSpots of the world can't solve for these recruiters that you guys are either built or building?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I think a big one, these firms, and this is, again, you'll see this a lot. It's starting to happen in other industries, but still not really trickled into right? This staffing and recruiting as a whole. Big one we see a lot is data cleanliness. We just launched a series of integrations with applicant tracking systems and CRMs, and a pervasive problem with them is stale data in these systems, right? I reached out to Brian 3 years ago when he was, a VP at company XYZ, but now he's actually, he's president at Ignite. And
I get this all the time. I still get recruited for product management jobs, and I've been a PM for years.
All exactly, and it's pervasive, and recruiters can't trust the data in their own database.
Yeah,
and so one of the things that we do is real-time data enrichment. So when you go and you use Talin to essentially find a subset of contacts or targets, again, doesn't matter if it's prospects for outbound or if it's for potential candidates for a role, we will automatically ping your database. If the contact exists, we'll update them. If they don't exist, we'll create a net new contact sort of in the system. And that's been a feature where that was one where we built it thinking it was like table stakes, not really thinking it'd be a huge deal. And every single firm we've demoed says, do you know how much time we spend? Our process today is I go on LinkedIn, I find a contact, I manually pull them up in our ATS to see if the data is still the same. And then I start my workflow on this individual. And we're like, yeah, you don't have to do that anymore. And it's just blown away.
That alone is like, where do I sign up? How much is it again? Yeah.
Yeah, here's a check. Yeah, exactly. So it's cool. It's just cool when, and again, I know I think this is the theme of the podcast, but when you are really,
I'm sorry, what's the theme of my podcast? I forgot. I thought we were just having a conversation. That's why I call it the Ignite podcast, because like I wanted to be able to talk to anybody about anything and not make it about something.
I like that. Yeah.
Specific, right? Yeah, we talk about venture capital, startups a lot, but I've also had like a meditation instructor on here, and I'll have a bunch of other random people eventually too, I'm sure.
Love that.
Yeah. What else? What other things are making their eyes light up when you're demoing?
On multi-channel is a big one. Just being able to go from email to a text message to a phone call, right? Yeah. All sort of within the same app. They'll use a bulk texting tool that they hook up to their ATS. Then they'll use a power dialer that they'll hook up to. They actually, many of them don't use. They'll just do a lot of the stuff manually. They might just literally text from their phone and then go manually input in their ATS. The multi-channel builds out like proper cadences with logic. I mean, we talked about that if this, then that sort of piece, right? Being able to say, hey, I'm going to send an email. If they don't respond to the email within X number of days, send a text message sort of as a follow-up, stuff like that. And how we built, and that stuff doesn't sound, it's not groundbreaking, but it's just a matter of just us being able to look at the vertical itself and get a deep understanding. Hey, what do you spend an hour, 3 hours, 5 hours a week doing on a manual basis?
Yeah.
And that's really how that's been the first phase of our company, is saying, hey, how do because we know that we can automate 20 hours of a 40-hour work week with out of the box. We know that we can.
That's crazy.
That. And we're building toward that. Phase 2 of, I think, where we go with this, and I think where a lot of vertical SaaS in general will go, is how do we turn a junior recruiter into a mid-level recruiter? How do we turn a mid-level recruiter into a senior recruiter? Just by virtue of fine-tuning some of the AI models that we're building some of this stuff on to generate phenomenal sort of outputs. That's phase 2 of, I think, where a company like this goes. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that's exciting about you guys is you become a system of record, right? You become the CRM and the email marketing tool. Are you guys also the ATS eventually as well?
So we actually, it's funny. This was a decision we had to pretty conscientiously make. We decided for the time being, like, we're not going to build an ATS or CRM.
Yeah.
The reason being is we knew, and we got some really good advice from some other founders who took this route and later regretted it. And it makes a ton of sense hearing it back from them. But they said, once you build a system of record, you a whole web of, infrastructure, maintenance pieces, all of that stuff, SOC 2 compliance, like all of it that you now have to deal with, and it will slow down your pace of development on the things that made you special.
Better to be the Marketo to the Salesforce kind of thing, or the HubSpot to the,
Exactly.
Although HubSpot kind of vertically integrated, they were a CRM and a mail marketing platform, but Marketo was very much back in the day.
Yeah.
I was a demand gen marketer.
I remember Marketo.
Top of
Yep. I use Marketo too. Yeah, exactly. I think that like we want to be sort of more of that play. That said, that doesn't mean we're never going to do it, because at some point, I think it's a growth lever. At some point, especially you look at ATSs as an example as a whole across the industry. First of all, not that many are designed for staffing and recruiting, and the ones that are a little bit older companies, a little bit more, the UX on most of them is not the greatest UX in the world. You go ahead one day and you build an ATS and you maybe take a page out of HubSpot's book and you make that and you start some freemium options there. And
right.
CRM or ATS is an example. You could, I think, putting on your growth marketer hat, products can, product marketing and using the power of cool things you build and making them widely available, like ChatGPT has done very astutely, is one of my favorite marketing strategies, right? It's just got to be, it's really hard to execute and you got to do it right. But that's kind of how I think about that. But I think right now there's so much stuff to build on the, on the route that we're on right now that we kind of want to stay focused for the time being.
Yeah. What's been the hardest thing doing a startup so far? And you're a first-time founder, right? I assume. And you didn't go through an accelerator? I forgot.
Yeah. So we're actually, we're in one right now. We're in the DMZ based here in Toronto out of DMU, out of Toronto Metropolitan. Yeah. So we're here now. It's been awesome. We're about a month in to the program, 18-month program. Just great program. It's been around for almost a decade now. It's one of the north of the border here. You're a Canadian too, so you know this, but there's not
dual citizen technically, but
yeah. There's not obviously not the same level of accelerators and resources up here, but this one has been around for a decade and is one of the well-known ones, especially here in Toronto.
Nice.
So it's been great. But for your question is what's been the hardest part about all of it? I mean, it's the highs and lows, right? I think that's the thing that you really got to prepare yourself for, is just knowing you're going to have some of the best days ever. You're going to be more excited about what you do probably than you've ever been before about any of your work or your craft or anything like that. But then you're going to have days where you're just like, what am I doing? And like, is this it? Are we toast? And that's going to happen a lot. And it's going to be, and you're not going to really know when it's going to come, and it will happen. Not, it'll just come out of nowhere. It's just one of those things where that if you're someone who's really not great at being able to handle that heavy variance of getting from one end of the spectrum to the other, of just these emotional pulls, that's the thing you really gotta brace yourself for. Because I'm a big believer in this, like, great startups, or I think the key to building a startup to get I think if you have any sort of exit or any sort of outcome, like, that's a huge win in in a world where there's like a 90% plus failure rate. The key, I think, to that or whatever is finding a way to hang on. And that's really like what it is.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about your background prepared you for all the trials and tribulations of running a startup?
Yeah, it's honestly, having just been in startups for eight plus years. Like I'm 30. I just turned 30. I'm 30 now. And I started working full time at a startup when I was 20. So I actually went part time in school during like third year day and started working full time as like an SDR, basically at an early stage startup. Because I was just enamored by just kind of like the glamour of it all just kind of got me. I was obviously wide-eyed kid, right? But then I stuck with it and then eventually went from sales to sort of marketing and growth and user acquisition, found that what I was good at and sort of got to understand the parts of startups that I really enjoyed and and so on. And then I grew a lot of confidence from that. Like I honestly saw a lot of startups that did decently that were run poorly. And like, I think most startups, when you lift up the hood, it's a dumpster fire for the most part. They just make it work.
Yeah.
But that I think seeing that and then seeing your own solutions get used and make an impact in these companies, you get a ton of confidence from that. And when you get that confidence, it builds a lot of resilience when you have your own thing. You kind of know when you make a mistake, you screw up or something's not going right, you have an idea of just how hard it is. You know what I mean? Like getting you're doing demos or getting a 15-20% conversion rate on a demo to close is crazy hard to get there. Like, and there's 18 variables that go into making that happen. Yeah, it's just being in. That's the number one thing I'd recommend to anyone thinking about starting a startup, especially in tech. If you've never been a part of a startup, I think you have to go work with them for a while. Go find a job in a startup, spend a year there. If you still want to do it, cool. But you gotta understand, I think, like how and I mean like early stage. I don't mean we have 150 people and raised our Series C.
Yeah,
like,
you want to be like an employee, hopefully as early as possible, but definitely like 10, 20, 30, somewhere in there. That's when you're going to learn a lot because there's not a lot of specialization. Everybody's doing everything and helping each other. And it's just like a small little ragtag group of people trying to figure it out. And that's when I've had the most fun. I was employee number one at a startup. I've been employee number one. I've definitely been very early, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. And I've also been, employee number 80 or 100 or even 1,000. But I think, having all that varied experience for me, I tried a couple of my own startups, but 20 years of experience working at startups, failing, getting punched in the face, like you said, and close ratios and all that stuff builds a lot of character and it builds a lot of, I love what you said, which is like, hey, if these guys can do it, I can probably do it. Because, it's hard, but a lot of it just comes down to resiliency and adaptability and stick-to-itness.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's easy to look at startups and just kind of think like, oh, that's so cool. Startups, and it's like most companies, most industries, they want to show you all of the good pieces and they want to hide or mute the not so sexy or the not so fun pieces of it. And if for a lot of people, I think a lot of personality types, a secure 9 to 5, you're just gonna be way happier doing that than a startup. And then there's other people where that will crush your soul, like sort of did to me. Funny story for me, I had one stint at a company like larger than, I think it was like 300 people the time when I went there, and I went to join as like a salesperson. I lasted 6 weeks there and quit. It was essentially was like a account executive there, and it was my first account executive role. And basically, like there was a call script for you were full cycle, so you were generating, closing your own pipeline, right? They put a script, like a binder in front of you, and said you read this script, and if you get a rebuttal, there is an answer for every single rebuttal, and it's like do not deviate from the script. And I was using the script, and and I'm the kind of person, and I don't know if this is a little bit of like my ADD or whatever, but if I'm not stimulated by like what I'm doing, it's very difficult for me to stay in it or like maintain concentration or just go do well at it. So I could barely like memorize the script. I started like deviating from the script, obviously. Got slapped on the wrist by my managers like multiple times within the first like month being there, until I was eventually like, I like called my manager into a room, like, this is not for me, man. I'm like, he's like, I know. He's like, I know, good luck. And that was it. That's the last time.
I love this story too, because this is what you have to do in your career, is you have to be willing to go like, this isn't for me, and walk away. And the hardest time I ever did that was when I, got to Wall Street, worked really hard, passed my level 1 CFA, like just worked super hard to like get there. And then it was like probably 3 or 4 months in, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. Like it didn't take me 6 weeks. It took me, maybe it was 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Can't remember. I was like, this isn't, and that's hard, right? Because you just invested so much time and energy, especially in that kind of career field, to get there. And I've done that multiple times in my career where, this isn't working. I'm just going to leave. And I've done it after 3 days. I've done it after 3 weeks and 3 months and so on. And you have to be willing to walk away and just be like, I made a mistake. This isn't for me. And keep asking yourself, what would you do if you had 10 or 20 million in the bank? And like, what do you really like want to work on? And it's hard work, but it's very rewarding eventually after you get through all your issues and trauma and experiences, and you figure it out eventually.
Yeah, and it sucks when it's happening, and it doesn't.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it necessarily like feels right when it's happening, but if it's just, I think in roles like that, if you have, if 80% of your days are not supposed to be bad days, you know what I mean? It should be, I think more good days than bad days.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
you shouldn't dread going to work on Sunday night. If you dread going to work on Sunday night, then you're probably doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Sunday night should just feel like any other night.
Yep.
And if it doesn't feel like any other night, you should start doing some soul searching, get a career counselor, whatever you need to do. But yeah, don't have the Sunday scaries.
Yeah. No, that's no fun, man. That's yeah, you can take the risk. Hopefully, if you have, I'm lucky. I had the privilege of being able to take those risks. I think that's something that is overlooked a lot. I came from like a pretty middle class family, but two parents worked for the government. But my house was always there. If I ever screwed up and couldn't pay rent, I could always go back to my parents' house. Stuff like that. It's if you have that privilege of at least like some kind of safety net there,
you have a little bit more freedom to explore. Like that was my problem. I grew up poor, worked full time in college. There was no safety net, and so I was just heads down trying to succeed. And it took me a long time to unravel that and figure out like what do I really like to do. And lots of like seeing a therapist and seeing a career counselor and trying things and moving around the world, and it's hard, man. It's like a hard path to unravel all that when you grow up like I did. But yeah, even kids that have every opportunity are still struggling in their 20s, I think, to figure out what they really like to do. Because sometimes they're just doing what they're told. Okay, I should go to pre-law. Okay, But really, like, you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. That's why I'm excited about AI, right? Because AI is going to help us. It's going to be like the movie Her, like in your ear, like guiding you every step of the way. Like it's going to read and see everything you see. And it's going to be a PhD level, super intelligent being companion that helps you figure out what makes your heart sing. Like, hey, I notice I think you have a lot of talent in this area. Maybe we should work on that together. And it'll be able to be like Dr. Dre level beat making, if that's what you're into, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think OpenAI is thinking along the same lines. Cause I don't know if you saw was it yesterday? The day before
the 4.0
yesterday.
Release. Yeah.
Yeah. 4.0. And the whole point of 4.0 is like extremely low latency for the purpose of making it.
You can just talk to it.
You can talk to it. Right. And so last night I went for a walk after like hopping up at like 9 o'clock after kind of wrapping up for the day. And I just walked around my neighborhood with my headphones in, just testing out 4.0, just literally having a complete conversation with it.
So cool.
So I'm Italian. I can speak like okay Italian. I'm like,
wow.
I'm conversational, but I'm not fluent. So I'm like, hey, this is me. I'm This is my acumen level in Italian. Let's have like an Italian lesson. Because I actually saw an OpenAI kind of, I guess, a piece of content doing the same thing. And then it just gave me an Italian lesson. Like it asked me questions, and you're right. And that endless applications across like all of this stuff, whether it's
the ambient intelligence is coming where it's just a PhD level assistant that knows everything about you and everything about your business, everything about your competitors, just everything.
Yeah.
It's an oracle that also is PhD level in all these fields. And it's just going to be sitting there going, hey, there's this email that you haven't responded to in 26 hours. I think you should take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I wrote the most correct response based on all 100,000 emails you've ever sent.
Yep.
Exactly. It's just a ridiculous level of ambient, like acceleration intelligence that's coming. But back to Talin. What's your vision? Like, what's your 10-year vision? Where are you guys at in 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like I said, I think I see us expanding to really be the complete suite of kind of tool, again, as many of them as possible, AI powered so that these recruiting agencies can essentially plug in, and these agencies can operate with. They can have that choice of either saying, hey, with our same 10-person agency, we're gonna do $80 million a year in revenue, as opposed to 8, right? Or someone a 3-person agency can operate as if they were a 20-person agency today. That's
more recruiting gets done than ever before with AI-enabled SaaS tools like yours, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think now it's very possible, I could see us getting like acquired, right, within 10 years. Probably not within 5, but within 10. Something that could happen, if I'm being honest. Like,
don't tell investors that.
They're going to get 100x on their investment, so they'll be happy. And they need those LP returns.
Right,
so
right, yeah.
They need
some exits. I'll call you up in like 9 years. I need some exits.
Yeah, exactly. No, we want to make them and our employees all happy with what that exit looks like. Yeah, because and then it's I'm a big, like, I think it depends on what the velocity of it looks like. I think it would be really cool. I love just building new things, and I like pushing our team to think of just novel ways of solving problems. And I'm always curious or wondering what if we develop, a piece of technology or a way of doing something that has way bigger applications than our defined market and our ICP.
Yeah. Well, that's the other playbook, right? So you kind of nail this thing, and then there's like this other thing. Real estate agents are very similar or whatever, and you kind of
exactly. Or you develop a piece of you develop something where you actually become an API layer for a ton of different industries instead of just building in that sort of vertical. Whatever that looks like. Something like that could lead to obviously something else. It could stay within Talin. It could be a new venture. Whatever that looks like. But yeah, my co-founder Trevor, we're kind of both similar in this way, in that we just like building stuff. I don't think I'll ever get tired of building stuff. I think when I was younger, I imagined, in X years, I'm going to sell this for X millions, and then, take off on my sailboat and live happily ever after, with, making
the trick is to find the thing that you'll never retire from. And I think I found that with Ignite and the podcast and everything, and investing in startups and helping founders and all that. I don't think I'll ever retire until I cognitively am told by the doctor that I probably shouldn't manage other people's money anymore. And I think I'll do it until I die. Maybe I'll pull back a bit. Like, I won't work as hard, but I don't think I'll ever stop doing it. I'll just do maybe a 3-day work week or something, or 4-day work week of it. But right now it's like 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, or 12 hours a day. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever stop.
Yeah. And I think it's really, I've been doing this for in total 2.5 years, full time 1.5 years. And there's just no shortage of motivation. You have obviously down days, but I think one of the questions I wanted to sort of answer for myself when I sort of started, I'm like, it's like, are you a founder? Like, and I try to take that really seriously, because everyone, it's easy to say I'd love to be a founder, like that, but until you're in it, are you made of that genetic material?
Yeah.
And
that's why I invest post-launch, post-revenue, because you don't actually, you're not a founder until you have somebody paying for your thing. I think. Like, because I've been there many times where I had some like paid pilots and we had some like little things going, but it wasn't really like to where you guys are at, because that's where you're really a going concern. You have 20 or 30K of monthly revenue or more, and businesses are relying on your product to run their company, and that's a beautiful thing.
That's the great litmus test of how important is your product, or how good is your product market fit. Is what if your servers go down for a day, how many calls you get from your customers.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Right?
What we like to say, the toothbrush test in VC is like, this is going to be used at least twice a day. And a product like yours, I can see recruiters just living in that product. It's just how they're just doing it all the time.
Yep. No, absolutely. Our best customers are launching like a campaign a day, and then they're probably logging in 4 or 5 times a day to like look and sort of monitor that campaign. And they can, because it's automating the X number of hours it would have taken to sort of do a lot of that stuff. Obviously, sort of manually. So,
well, let's wrap up with a quick rapid fire, if that works. What's a book that has profoundly affected your professional life or outlook?
48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one in a while. Yeah,
it's a dark one, and it's not meant to be prescriptive. Like, it shouldn't be like, hey, you need to now live your life through the 48 Laws of Power, because that's a dark road. If you do that, it's very Machiavellian, that book. I think it's meant you need, if you're going to go and do things and put yourself out there, you have to be aware of these powers and laws that can be used sort of against you. And I think it makes you really aware of how people around you move. So
yeah, and I remember, I ran a pretty large team at Microsoft, and it was just complete Game of Thrones there, like just all the power in politics. I took a power in politics course in grad school, so I read that book back then. It was like 10 years ago now, I think.
Oh,
years ago.
And the person working at at Microsoft needs that book probably more than I do. You know what I mean?
100%.
If you actually don't like politics as much, you should start a startup, because
you should definitely be at a startup if you don't like politics, because it'll just be about who's working the hardest and who has the best ideas. It's not about like, hey, like, let's talk about the org chart and stuff. Yeah, we're not 100%. Doing that. No, we got hair on fire. We got to go solve this problem right now. This customer is threatening to cancel and take us to court or whatever.
Exactly. It's pragmatism to a fault, I think. Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception people have about recruitment or recruitment automation?
The fact that it generates an output it is like subhuman, or like not as good as what a human could do in many cases, and the fact that it will also drive away recruiters from the human centered elements of the job. It will automate the tedious. It will free the mind from toil. It is not going to make the whole experience with candidates less human. In fact, the opposite's going to happen. You're going to get to spend an extra 5-10 minutes on that discovery call with that candidate. You're going to spend an extra 5 to 10 minutes making sure that employee or that potential candidate is a really good fit, for the job, and that they're happy, they're getting what it's going to improve the human-centered elements of the job.
Yeah, I love that. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Just be consistent. You're not gonna, you're not gonna get in shape in 2 months. You're not going to hit that massive goal on a sprint. Just do the right and put your head down, figure out what the right inputs are, iterate on them, refine over time, but do good, healthy things day in and day out consistently.
Yeah, I love that. What's your favorite tool or app that helps you in your daily life or routine, daily work?
You know what? Maybe a bit of a surprise, because I think it's actually now it's starting to get better, and I want to see next. I need to see some AI app in here, but it's the Notes app on my iPhone. It's the simplest, most basic app, but thoughts, ideas just go straight into the Notes app, and it's searchable. And I kind of have keywords that I know to search now and then, and it brings up. I just need NLP in that. If you're listening, I need NLP in my Notes app. But I use that app more than any other app.
Wow, I love that. What's one recruitment industry practice you wish would change immediately?
Shallow personalization. Using personalization elements that don't matter it's actually educating recruiters on what really good personalization and effective personalization looks like.
Yeah, I love that. Last question: who is a leader you admire and why?
I don't know if I have one. I'll give you a sort of a different answer on this one. It's pretty rare that when I see someone, and I don't know, maybe this is me getting older and getting more skeptical, when I hear someone, whether it's on social media or otherwise, kind of starting to say something I like, I start to consume, inevitably more of their content. And I always challenge myself to not agree with absolutely everything they're saying, to try to remove myself from the bias that I really sort of like that person too much. And inevitably I start to find, when you change your lens, you find things you disagree with my. It's not that I don't admire them, but I try not to.
Anytime you get into a new domain, you kind of like you latch onto a few key thought leaders, and Jason Calacanis for me, and then slowly, 8-9 years on, I'm like, I don't actually agree with everything he says, because I've developed my own theories about investing in startups and helping founders, and there's still a lot of overlap, but sometimes it's just not what I believe to be true anymore after being in the industry for so long. Not that he's not right a lot, he is, but there's lots of folks like that, right? As you get deeper and deeper and deeper into a domain and you get more experience, you realize, some leaders, maybe they just got lucky, right place, right time.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to figure it out.
And honestly, and it's hard because it's honestly hard for me to say that I admire too many of them. Who I admire? I admire my grandparents who came here on a boat with $4 in their pocket and worked as a janitor and a baker for 30 years to buy a house.
Right.
that like you kind of start to understand, you think our lives we work hard, there's a lot going on. Then you look back and you look at like what they did and you go, wow. That's the kind of stuff I admire.
Yeah.
The thought leaders that I like to look at I want to learn from their ideas. There's what I think is smart, what I disagree with, etc., and kind of leave it at that. Not a lot of admiration. I kind of save for them, if that's fair.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Julian, thanks for coming on. How can listeners find out more about you and Talin?
Thanks, Brian. So you can go to talin.ai, TALIN.ai. You can check us out there. And if you want to reach out to me, have a chat about pretty much anything at all, you can hit me up at Julian@Talin.ai. But hey, thanks, Brian. This was awesome. Appreciate the chat today.
Likewise. Thanks for coming on.